Officially for the record, today is June 17th, 2021, a Thursday, and this is a meeting of the Minnesota Geospatial Advisory Emergency Preparedness Committee. Roll call. If you didn't register, I won't know that you're here, but I'm smart enough to realize that I got a bunch of people here that I can remember were here. So thank you very much for joining us. The recording is in fact on, so we're in okay shape there. And so here's the agenda as previously published and is available as a, what do they call that? A Word document. Anyway, with that thought in mind, to make this official, do I have a motion to open this event?
So moved.
Do
Second.
I? Oh, Cory jumped on it right away. We have the second from Cory. If you're opposed to this meeting getting underway, please speak up. Hearing none, we are officially underway. Okay, looks like in terms of meet and greet, the only one that is checking in kind of off the net. Eric, could you just give us a thumbnail? Refresh my memory. Oh, you got to go on mute.
Sorry about that. I'm Eric with the City of Blaine.
Okay. Got it now. So Cory dragged you into this, didn't she?
I don't know, but I was curious about joining, and Cory was very encouraging me of doing that.
Okay.
Supportive.
Thank you very much, Eric. I appreciate you being here.
Yeah.
And that goes to everybody, but one last person, Brad Roman, why don't you check in and just fill folks in a little bit about what you do and where you work, that sort of thing.
Yep. How do you hear me?
We got you loud and clear, sir. Go ahead.
Good. Brad Roman, Hennepin County Emergency Management. So my background is in GIS and IT. I currently perform both functions along with different operational type functions as well via could be heavy equipment or intel, depending on what's needed. That's
okay.
all.
So Brad, weren't you previous at Logis? Is my memory bad?
No, I made my way through the county through several different departments. So been with the county about 19 years or so.
Okay.
So started out in the sheriff's office, water patrol, and made my way through GIS, public works, taxpayer services, and a whole bunch of other stuff. And here I am in emergency management.
Okay. All right. Well, that's great that you're actually, so you're working for Eric Woggy then.
Yep.
Cool. Very cool. Okay. Thanks for joining us. And with that, we now, as you can well see, we have an agenda up there. Are there any desires to change something on the agenda? Going once, going twice, gone. All right, so we're underway with the agenda as published. That moves us to updates, issues, and the world famous good efforts. Well, as you can see, I have not updated my break slides, so you're stuck with the size of Greenland versus South America. Trust me, it's been one of those weeks. So you're just stuck with poor update slides, except for the actual slides are updated on the inside. So that's the good part. So here's kind of an interesting rundown of all the places in some form or fashion the EPC has had interest in what has been going on over the last 3 months or so. And as you can see, we've been either in a lot of places or tuned into what's going on in a lot of different places. It's been a very, very, very busy stretch. So starting March 16th, the Critical Infrastructure Project Team, and I'll just point out, they have been meeting with a high level of frequency, and they're making great strides and moving forward of nailing down a way to get us to a state-sponsored level of information on where the critical infrastructure is in the state and a way to maintain it going forward. So kudos to them. They had 2 meetings in May, and they've got another one scheduled there at the bottom, or they just had another one, I should say, on June 11th. I don't want to belabor the rest of the stuff that's up here, except for one thing. Kudos to Cory for getting that effort going with the EPC volunteer thing. So acknowledgement there. Thank you very much. Now, in contrast to what you just looked at, here's what the next 3 months looks like. And I'm very, very happy about this, given the fact that the first 6 months have probably been the busiest this committee has ever had, with the WLIA stuff and Randy's work with getting Wisconsin USNG maps up, and just the whole host of where everybody has been. It has been just, as I said, a real crazy period of time. And now we got kind of a break in here, but as we will hear, it's going to get filled in with some other stuff. But just awareness for those of you that might be interested in the U.S. National Grid Institute working group or implementation working group. Next meeting's July 28th, 2001 at 1 p.m. And the information about will be, or if it's not been published yet, you'll find it at www.usngi.org. And that's a URL change, as I noted last time we met, from where that stuff has been previously been hosted. And I'll talk a little bit more as we get further into this about what's gone on with the formation of an actual institute. So let's talk some people. Mark Kotz, this is The King is Dead. The Minnesota Geospatial Advisory Council chair departs. He was the GIS warrior. And Cory knows what slide's coming next, don't you, Cory? There she is, Cory Richter, the new MGAC chair. And it's a good thing that you were a rodeo queen, because you're going to, what's
Steve,
that?
You said the king is dead. Let's please make sure everybody understands Mark Kotz is alive and well.
Yes, he is very much alive and well.
He's very much alive and well and busy, and he's just stepped down from the get. Okay, I just didn't want to scare anybody. Mark's doing just
okay. All right.
Yes, Mark is alive and healthy.
Well, and long live the queen. Is that okay, Randy?
Yeah. And I'm only interim until we get the official word.
Okay.
From the commissioner. So.
All right. Do you have any words for this esteemed group that you'd like to pass along about your role there, and what kind of help and that sort of stuff you might need?
So as we continue to move forward and keep building on the work at the MGAC, what I would like to see happen, and again, this is all interim until we make it official in September. What I'd like to see happen is, as the footprint and the work of this group, the EPC, has been going out and getting into more areas, I want to make sure that it's a good understanding across the state of Minnesota that the EPC does more than just USNG. You know, that we've got so much more out there.
I thought that's all.
Well, I mean, because of the critical infrastructure and the underground utilities working group, I want to be able to draw together more of those cross connections, especially with their folks in the asset management side and other areas where we have all these cross connections. And then I'm looking to bring in some folks from the law enforcement corner and the crime analysis and intelligence piece too. So we may have some sharing that we can do with them, and some advice for some of those folks as they start to become much more involved with the GIS world in Minnesota. So that's what I have. I have big hopes, big plans. We'll see what actually happens though, because as we know.
Easier said than done?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you, Cory. Really appreciate it. And congratulations on this new position. And we wish you all the best.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, somewhere in here, I got to figure out how to continue advancing slides, because I flunked that part of the, well, whatever. EPC IT, I just want to update something on that because I've been asked a couple of questions about it. As we talked about last time, there is a new website up. It's been up now for, I don't know, 6-8 months, something like that. You can find it at MGAC and it looks like they may, and Cory, maybe you can jump in on this. We are going to work to maybe a more, across all the committees, a more uniform look, update, refresh, however you want to rephrase it, both on the front side and the ability for coordination on the backside. So look forward to maybe even seeing us get updated again. But what I wanted to point out is at the bottom of the screen there, if you have a desire to jump over to the working function of the group, all you got to do is click at the bottom of the page where it says, I can't even read it, MGAC EPC net. So we're on .org right now. And if you want to go over to .net, it jumps you onto this page or this partial page that I'm showing here. And the point I'm trying to make here is at the bottom of the page, there is a way to jump back to where you started out, or if you drop in on .net and you want to go over to the front-facing public website, the .org, well, you can do that at the bottom of the page, and then all the project works over on the left-hand side. And one last point here is all good things must come to an end. So if you've not ever, or I should say it this way, if you've never built a site before in Google Sites, the classic one is going away. It had superb functionality in the way that we used it. And unfortunately, this new sites thing just doesn't cut the mustard, but we have to find a solution for what we got here in the back page. And so by August 31st at midnight, this website will turn into a pumpkin. So in the next 2.5 months, yours truly is going to have to come up with a new way to get there. And maybe hopefully I can dovetail that into what the work is going to be going on at the MGAC to try to get that functionality running in a uniform way. So there you go. Yeah, Texas is not as big as we thought it was. Okay, so last time we talked about the social media thing. I am, as I indicated, am not going to do any more work in keeping these two guys live. But since there's almost 300 people signed up over LinkedIn for the EPC, I will keep that one running because it's pretty easy and it's not hassling me the way every time I turn around, there's a text message from Facebook telling me it wants to suggest a new friend. So I'm just not interested in that. So those guys are going away. Something near and dear to my heart, in case you aren't aware of it, GITA recently announced that they are in fact going to wind down operations, I think, is the way they stated it. They went from at one point 9 full-time staff throwing conferences where over 2,500 people would show up and giving away cars. Yeah, that's right, CAR, as door prizes to coming off the rails. And it's truly an unfortunate development, I think, on several fronts. Personally, for me, some of you are aware, I dumped almost 6 years of my life into trying to keep the organization going, from that full-time staff, transitioning it to a member-run organization, changing overall their IT structure, and that came about as a result of I was the only member on the board of directors when GITA staff had run it out of money to the point where, or I should say the money was not coming in the door, to the point where full-time staff was no longer feasible. And to the degree that I was the only one that had any nonprofit experience, it came to live with Shared Geo for 6 years. And we thought they were on a reasonable trajectory for someone else to take over. And that was in September of 2018, and unfortunately didn't work out. So that's the first comment. The second comment I would pass along is it's very ironic to me that in the era where we are finding more and more of our infrastructure under attack, and SCADA system, I even forget what it stands for, but it's the control of the nation's infrastructure is essentially run by GIS. And it's ironic that this organization, of all of them, would be going away at this point. And also when you consider just the realities of how important geospatial data is versus utilities, yeah, it's a sad development. Once again, the plug's out there. Leaders are needed. We need somebody to really roll up their sleeves and get in there and then make that education stuff happen. And then there's that outreach. We need an outgoing somebody that wants to make the world know about all the resources that are available to get your emergency management program humming along on GIS. Okay. So like I told you, I didn't replace my brake slides, but here we go. Once again, proof that the cows are the ones that are running the world. Okay. EPC YouTube channel, we continue to click along. There were 26 views over the last 24 hours, crossed 700. So we're liking the way things are developing there. I know that doesn't sound like a lot of views to you folks that have tuned into 2 million on one particular YouTube channel, but for the subject matter we're doing pretty darn good. Okay, what else do we have for you? Stacey Stark, she's been cranking along, as I've indicated before, on this critical infrastructure thing. So she gets acknowledgement for good effort out there. Thank you very much, Stacey. And I hope if you've tuned in from somewhere on a lake in the Boundary Waters, you got the message. Thanks, Stacey. Okay, here we go. Also, big kudos for BJ Kolstead. She's been doing field support for the U.S. National Grid ELM program. Recently drove down from Two Harbors / Silver Bay. I forget which. She's going to wring my neck because I can't remember, but Silver Bay. Let's go with that. Down to the Bayfield area to give a CAD / dispatcher / responder presentation. And any of you that have seen the slides that she put together, it's absolutely fabulous. And it's the first really targeted towards the dispatcher community set that I've ever seen. She did kind of a skim along the top for WLIA, but the slides she's put together now they're really something. So kudos to BJ. We've got a new county checking in Wisconsin on interest in putting up ELM markers. Fred, I apologize. I always mess it up, but I believe it's Yowsley is how you pronounce his last name, is spearheading an effort to get his county in one of their parks to set up a regional test for Dane County, which is a big deal. The University of Madison is there. And of course, the state capital resides in Madison. So I've told them we'll do everything and anything we can to help them out. One moment. Let's see what we got here. Okay. And with that, Cobb County, as I mentioned before, phase 4 has just wrapped up. So we're happy with that. And they're continuing to encourage other counties in Georgia to keep the move on with their efforts. And so wonderful, wonderful development there. LCCMR grant requests. One was put in for ELMs. Shared Geo requested $198,000 to put in 10 pilot projects. The vast majority of the money is for personnel to go into the field and present to 10 different counties to install in each of those a pilot project. So this would be very similar to what happened down in Georgia, where Cobb County did a pilot project and then jumped in with both feet to do their entire county. So we're hopeful that that this grant request will get a favorable review, and then that would come. What happens is there's a preliminary review panel that is going to meet. The new schedule is July 6th, where they will select what proposals will get a full hearing, and then a presentation will be done online, and the dates for those will be July 13, 15, 20, 27, 28, and you guessed it, 29. And then August 26th, the selection announcements will be made. So this money would show up in July of 2022 if it passed the initial selection and it passed the review panel and was sent to the legislature, where they would make a final determination on funding. So if you got toes and fingers, keep them crossed on this one for us, because we think we could make some really serious progress if in fact we can get this thing through and funded. U.S. National Grid Institute has actually very close to being formally enacted as an operating entity. Papers have been drawn up to allow for what's known under the IRS code as fiscal sponsorship, and it would live under the umbrella initially of Shared Geo. So effectively, the Institute would come into existence as a project of Shared Geo, and after it got up on its legs and running, if it chose to do so, all the paperwork will be in place, which will allow it to be move forward as its own self-standing entity. And the formation chair is myself. The secretary is Al Stutt from Cape Canaveral, and the treasurer is BJ Kolstead. And again, you have to enact a charter, you have to enact bylaws. All of those things will be done prior to it becoming a fiscal sponsorship program of Shared Geo, but that's well underway. For those of you that have interest in what that logo, everything in it, actually means something, and it only took us the better part of a year to come up with it. So the gold represents that U.S. National Grid is simply an extension of the military grid reference system. So we're acknowledging the core of where it came from as being the Department of Defense. Red is to honor the fire service, blue is to honor the law enforcement, and white is to honor the EMS. And of course, red, white, and blue taken together is an acknowledgement of an American effort, a U.S. national effort. There are 10 leaves on the olive branches of learning to represent the unit of 10, and XY down here on the bottom is acknowledgement that the effort for the U.S. National Grid ongoing efforts are a direct result of the original XY project. And so there you got it, or there you have it. Okay, last but not least, acknowledgement to Florida State University. They've done a tremendous amount of work on figuring out how to use population density mapped into U.S. National Grid as being a way to help the search and rescue community more accurately determine how they should focus their response efforts. This was previously asked for in the last hurricane season, and on the dead space between the two hurricane seasons, Florida State University, Georgiana Strode and Michael Cory rolled up their sleeves, got to it, and were able to produce this document. So massive kudos to them. Okay, so I'm coming up for air. What did I forget? What other victories or defeats are out there? Anybody got anything? Who did I forget to mention? Going once. Don't everybody talk at once. Going twice. Gone. Okay, here we go. All right, that takes us to the project team reports. And I think, of course, that puts me on the hook again. Leadership team, Vice Chair Randy Knipple, Brad Anderson, due to other places and commitments, has asked to step down. So that more or less leaves us with Brian Huberty, Cory, Stacey Stark, Randy, and myself. If you have interest in contributing to how this whole operation gets steered and where things are going, by all means, please raise your hand. Love to talk to you and get things rolling. I wanted to mention, beyond the fact, again, I briefed last time that there is in fact a new charter. Okay, good enough. And there's also the work plan and the accomplishments from 2020. They're published out there. You can go to the MGAC.org or MGACEPC.org website and take a look at that stuff anytime. But more importantly, beyond thinking about joining us, is that if you want to keep up on what we've been up to lately, we are quarterly required to submit either an annual activity report, which starts being put together in December and gets issued sometimes in January, as late as maybe April. But there's also each quarter subsequent, we publish something that goes up to the MGAC. And if at any time you want to find out what any of these project teams are involved in at the moment, you have a way to do so just by clicking on that, and you can see reports all the way back to 2006. So there you have it. And here's what our last one, quarterly update kind of thing looked like. Volunteer initiative, Cory, could I ask you to just kind of chat about that for a bit?
For sure. So we're cooking along, and we've been building out some different resources. So talking with the folks that have been attending the meetings, and we're loosely doing them quarterly right now. A lot of it's determined based on whatever the current emergency is that people are responding to. So it's been a little irregular. But outside of that, we've had some really good interest in reviewing the GEMS project information, the curriculum, to see how current and relevant everything is. We're compiling lists of what we all have been told at various times in our career are baseline ICS courses that we have to have, looking at additional training that folks need to have, and really just building that network between practitioners so that when there's an issue, we can call each other up. So like Peter, who's on the call, and a couple other folks here, they've been on those meetings, and we've chatted about that. So one of the good things that we're building up during this is a resource index of places to find open source data to support different operational needs. And that's been one of the really nice outcomes. A couple people are super interested in taking out a GEMS curriculum, so I'm hoping that maybe before we close out 2021, we can officially relaunch that.
Yeah. Yeah, Cory, you have, again, I know I sound like a broken record between you and Brian, but been having to stamp out the big forest fires as they come, and sorry, you guys are like a little brush fire compared to what I don't mean to minimize your efforts, but I'm just saying, as soon as I can get around to helping you, I will for sure. So there you go.
We're doing okay. We understand it. There are these bigger things going on. So
yeah.
And while we're just kind of this informal group of volunteers swapping ideas and sharing information amongst each other, we'll worry about it when we become more formalized.
Okay. Very cool. Thank you very much for that. Appreciate it. Okay, critical infrastructure assessment. I have to admit that, Peter, have you been attending any of those meetings?
No, I have not. Since I moved over to MnState, MnSCU,
yep.
I'm no longer in the UMN Geospatial loop.
Okay.
I attended the last one, Steve.
Do you want to talk a little bit about that, Randy?
Sure. It's this can be a very broad topic, but the focus of the group right now initially is police stations, fire stations, schools, and hospitals, medical clinics, and initially focusing on fire stations. So it's really trying to get a hold of something to drive the process forward of identifying an initial data set and identifying a repository and initial data schema, and then figuring out how to engage people in authenticating or providing some feedback on the completeness and accuracy of that data set. So that's the initial focus is fire stations. We'll be moving forward on that. There's a few people that are going to start that, and that's really where they're at.
Okay, just update for the group. What I would add to that is initially Stacey's to frame this. Initially, Stacey's effort was to simply know the location of the items that are listed there: emergency medical services, emergency operations centers, fire stations, law enforcement facilities. In the hospitals was in there somewhere also, but and the reason she did that was for support of the HAZIS program in flood modeling for the state. And so once she started, or the discussion got going about the degree to which it'd be great to have a state-sponsored layer for these kinds of things, that dovetailed in with the old program, which was previously the Minnesota Structures Collaborative. There have been a lot of work done there, and that got her interested to the point where she's taken this on to, if you will, revive the groundbreaking work that was done with that Structures Collaborative. So, that's why I'm like totally jazzed to see the level of involvement of what Stacey's been doing and how this thing's been moving along. So great thing to see continuing to cook along. As I mentioned earlier on the schedule, she's going to be plugging forward every a meeting once a month. So great on them.
And if I can just say, that makes so much sense, because each county's has this preparedness plan has to include the geospatial mapping of these structures anyway. So why not make it be a fabric, like a layer that we have in the state?
Yeah. Thank you, Peter. Appreciate that. Underground utilities mapping thing. This is, to say it's a wild beast would be an understatement. Again, this is somewhat of it is a repeat slide, but the reason I repeated it, you'll see that the next slide after this is we completed basically the work plan for 2020, and that was to form the project team. The pilot projects started. There are several actual technical projects that are out running in the field, and we have, on the YouTube effort, been able to put presentations up that have been given to the larger group. And there's some really interesting stuff there. People are really thinking outside the box. And I would encourage you, if you got an opportunity to go over there and dig around and look at some of that stuff, there is, again, I don't want to specifically, push one presentation over another, but I would tell you to go take a look at some of that stuff because it's out there. Then in 2021, we're working on finishing up research, really is what it amounts to at this point. We've got a pretty good lay of the ground. There are a number of presentations are going to be given, and I'm going to show that here in a second. Articles are being published in the standard bearer program for this whole thing of how to avoid underground infrastructure when you're using a backhoe, and that is called Damage Prevention Professional. And then we're going to start the draft of it. Although it says best practices here, it's actually going to be more of like a way forward document, because best practices doesn't really imply what we're going to try to achieve here. We're going to try to achieve a blueprint of what needs to be done in what sequence and what are the options at each point in that decision tree. And then we expect to have that released by the beginning of 2022 or in first quarter. And then national conferences, well, that's kind of, we've actually got this kind of backwards because we're already being invited to national conferences, and then continuing the feedback loop and so on and so forth. What are the outcomes? More accurate maps, ability to share data, and safer as execution. So here's what I wanted to show you. Busy. Off of that first slide, I really need everybody just to get their head wrapped around the idea that what we are doing here is a first time effort in the US. Other folks have tackled pieces of what we're doing, but we're going after the whole enchilada. We're looking at a comprehensive way to know effectively where underground infrastructure is, make sure that information is accurately available in the hands of locate crews, planners, you name it, guys running backhoes, et cetera, et cetera. US is way behind the United Kingdom. They got going on this whole issue back in 2006, pretty much for the same thing that's driving us now. As our population density has gone up, and there's becoming more and more need to keep digging in the ground, and the issue is never going to go away. It's always going to be there, that we got all this stuff buried underground and nobody knows where it is for sure. So it comes down to, or I should say, nobody knows where it is for sure comprehensively. So there's this thing called Scottish Vault, and then there's also a high commission in the UK that has done a lot of work, and we're going to piggyback off of a lot of that. Upcoming events, we're still on the hook to present to the Minnesota Clean Water Council, and they're still trying to work out when they're going to fit us in. And that's going to be the whole Minnesota Water, the Clean Water Council, the entire one. So that beast is out there. We don't know where that's going to pop in. We're invited presenters at the Common Ground Alliance national meeting in Orlando. 4 of us are going to go down there. Gopher State One call us, picking up the bill. Presentation schedule is we're looking to have that completed by mid-August. We have to actually submit in advance the presentation September 12th. And then the presentation date is October 13th, which happens to fall right over the top of Minnesota GIS LAS. So we're throwing a couple of members from the larger project team under the bus, and we volunteered a couple of them to present up at Minnesota GIS LAS. And then we've already been invited to the Global Excavation Safety Conference March 1 through 3 in Phoenix, Arizona. So this is tough duty to have to go to Orlando and Phoenix to present. It's terrible. So we're invited for that also. Small group meetings. We are resting the horses in the large group meetings for the months of June, July, and August, so that the writing largely can be done. and we're looking to have first draft come out of the something already kind of starting to gel by the time we get into this presentation cycle. So that's what that one looks like. Let's see here. Did I miss something? Okay, education, vacant, hint, foot stomper, outreach, vacant, stomp, whatever. Response, geospatial assistance. Brian, you got good news for us?
Well, what kind of good news are you looking for?
Yeah, like I said, poor Brian, you know, I promised Brian I was going to help him out with this thing. And then he's just been overrun by events, and I apologize, Brian. So,
well, I do have a suggestion for your next speaker, and that will be Jill Taylor from EPA down in Dallas.
Okay.
She just presented literally 2 hours before us with Tom Hollenhorst's EPA remote sensing group. And they had over 100 people on, but it was the Aspect aircraft, which is has nuclear and chemical mapping capabilities, sort of unique. And I didn't realize that it even existed until that presentation. She gave a great presentation, but it'd be worthwhile having the group listen to what the capabilities are, just so they're aware of it.
Is this is the airplane owned by Department of Energy, or is it?
No, it's EPA's.
Interesting.
It's a Kodiak.
Okay, so the concept there then would be rather than going out and sniffing like DOE would be after an event, this is more aimed at commercial leaks that EPA would want to know about.
Exactly what's happening there in northern Illinois right now with that grease plant fire.
Okay.
But they're headquartered out of Dallas because that's where all the petrochemical processing is, and it makes a lot of sense.
Hey, James, you want to talk about that thing going on down there in Illinois? Just thumbnail. No, maybe James isn't with us after all. Okay. Well, wait a minute. Oh, okay. Fair enough. Yeah, that's exactly where I am. Okay. Well, hold on one second, folks. Okay. Brian, anything else you want to mention?
Well, other than the LCCMR proposal, but we're in the same boat as the Elm thing. It's wait and see if it's approved.
Okay. Thanks, sir. Situational awareness sharing initiative. I beat this dead horse to death, but what I do want to mention is we really are going to start working towards dovetailing that effort in with the critical infrastructure, because the train's headed in the same direction. We might as well, all ride the caboose or whatever. Response, U.S. National Grid, Randy Knipple, you now have the floor, sir.
Okay, Steve's mentioned a number of things already. The primary emphasis has really been on the implementation working group. Steve's really taking the lead on that, support from Shared Geo. And we have a number of people across the nation that are involved in that. And so that's really encouraging to know that we're involved in something that has national significance. The intent is to provide some kind of guidance for helping organizations know what it takes to actually become compliant for implementing the U.S. National Grid, as well as to give them tools. And with that, we have published a number of videos. I put a link to the EPC YouTube channel in the chat. You want to check that out yourself. It's got some of the other videos that Steve referenced, but also we've been able to, since we're giving virtual meetings, it's real easy to record them, and we're able to get the 3 presentations that we made for the Wisconsin Land Information Association, one that I gave, Steve gave, and one that BJ Kolstad gave. So those are all recorded. Also recorded the presentation that I gave at the last EPC meeting on making maps for the U.S. National Grid. That was recorded, and that's out there too, as well as a number of other things too. So I encourage you to check that out. it's nice to have a library of videos now that people can really discover and explore on their own. Let's see, I'm just going through. We do provide actual written updates to the Geospatial Advisory Council at their quarterly meetings. The last quarterly meeting was May 26th. And I'm just hitting some highlights from that. I think the next thing was that Shared Geo did release the documentation of the dynamic magnetic declination diagram. That's significant. In order to be U.S. National Grid compliant, you do need to have a magnetic declination diagram. And for those who don't know what that means, it basically shows you the angular difference, or the azimuthal difference between true north, magnetic north, and grid north. And that's how you make corrections in bearings when you're measuring on a map. That is time sensitive because magnetic north changes over time. So it can actually be computed. The formulas are out there, and Shared Geo put together an application that allows you to just hit it, and hit it with a lat long and a date, and it returns an image of the magnetic declination diagram that can be then placed in a map, either for one specific map, or as with the statewide 10K maps, the magnetic declination diagram is actually unique for each map. So it all happens automatically as every map is generated. In the background, it's hitting that site and generating the magnetic declination diagram for the map, and it doesn't exist anywhere else. It's a very innovative approach, and really glad to see that out there.
Randy, if I could jump in just real
Sure.
quick, I don't know how I managed to delete it, but I actually had a slide in here. Good efforts, Jim Class, and the effort that Randy talked about is actually received some pretty widespread press in Europe, of all places.
Oh,
So
really?
I'm not real sure why they're so interested in that, but
well, they get some wild differences in magnetic north and grid north and true north, of course.
Yeah, so maybe that's
magnetic north is up in Canada, and it's pretty much almost it's aligned with true north in Minnesota. Anywhere else on the planet, it's quite different.
Yeah, that's interesting. I had not thought of that, that element driving the interest. So he's relieved a burden for a lot of people in Europe. So cool.
Yeah. Well, I think the last thing, and I forgot what it was. There was another thing I was going to point out.
Did you want to talk about I put this slide up here we've got your Wisconsin maps up there now.
Yeah. As a follow-up to the Wisconsin Land Information Association presentations, we did get a number of counties that expressed interest in creating their own maps. And that was really driving me to refine the process for creating the maps based on what I did in Minnesota, and create some documentation. And I got to a point where I really had to run through it myself to remember how I did it. And in the process, refined it further and decided I'd just go ahead and make all the maps. So I ended up just making all the maps for Wisconsin. And then something similar happened in Georgia. That's about half-baked right now, but I think that's going to lead us to the point where we will have a much more highly refined process for creating maps, and likely a set of maps as well that could happen for any state. We could end up with maps for the entire U.S. out of the deal. It's really pretty straightforward. The whole issue is creating the maps at the grid zone junctions. That's always been the sticking point, and getting that resolved once and for all will just open up the doors for all of this. So that's a big deal. But then Shared Geo is also hosting an application for giving you a spatial access to the different maps that are available. And I am working with them to create a developer, a Shared Geo developer, to refine the process that would allow anybody to submit maps to this application, so they would just appear. And I think we've got a good approach that will be very flexible, allow the maps to be anywhere. We don't have to move maps all over the place. We just need to get them on the web and then have a spatial index to those maps that can then be published through this application. So that'll be pretty slick, and I think we'll have something soon.
Good. Thank you very much, Randy. I appreciate that. Okay. I think that ties it up. Any questions for the project team, folks? Going once, going twice, gone. Old business. Do we have any old business? Plenty of it, but nothing we want to dredge up. Something we want to dredge up. Going once, going twice, gone. New business. Oh, here comes Brian. Look out.
Quick drought, fire, rivers running low. Something to just watch out here in the coming months, because this is going to eat everybody's lunch if it really continues.
Thank you, Brian.
Thanks for the
Appreciate
good
that.
news. Thanks for the good news, Brian.
Yeah, so we better start looking for those fire maps and pulling them into the EPC website. Okay, let's do it. Chair closing comments. Uh-oh. What happens here? Broken Compass Award. Who's getting it this time? Brian, what do you think we should do?
I think we should give it to Steve Swayze, since he was a pilot. How did he not get lost without figuring out what magnetic declination was?
I failed to Evelyn.
Or why it was so different, why Europe would be interested in.
Evelyn Wood's sped reading map course. I failed it. So what can I say? All right, here we go. Actually, we're going to be nice. I want to say thank you very much to Iowa Public Television. Not only did they do it once, but they did it twice in terms of putting stories about U.S. National Grid and how the technology can be used to successfully answer the problem of response to a location without a street address, or a backup to a street address, even if it's a mixture between Pine Street, Pine Avenue, Pine Boulevard. You get the idea. So there you go. So they did it not only in 2020 on April 17th, they ran a repeat of it this past May 28th. And anyway, and how we can get the word out on U.S. National Grid is a wonderful thing. And I think with that, we have reached the end of our meeting, the admin part. And so I would, at this juncture, throw out for whatever time is going to work best in September. This June and September time slots tend to be the really ugly ones for trying to make good things happen. But what do you all think? 16th or the 23rd? The input from the crowd is deafening, or deafening, something like that. Where did we find this guy?
Hey, there was one more thing I was going to mention, Steve, and that was you mentioned the Minnesota GISLAS conference this fall.
Yep.
And I did submit a couple of abstracts for U.S. National Grid presentations.
Good.
But yeah, we don't want to get in the middle of that. But that's, I think, the beginning of October, I believe.
Okay. Any choice on these dates? Randy, what do you think? What do you got?
September 16, 23rd. 23rd is better, but I can do either.
Let's go later in the month. It avoids I've just got back to school and my kids don't have notebooks thing. Okay. All right. Are we good?
Looks good.
And should we go in person, Randy? Should we brave it?
If it's on the 23rd, I can do it in person. If it's the 16th, it'll be virtual.
All
I
right.
mean, I think we need to do hybrid regardless.
Yeah, no,
We've always
I-
talked about hybrid.
Yeah.
But should we try to restart in person is what I'm asking.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah,
there we
I've
go.
got an August statewide meeting that's scheduled face to face, so we might as well go for it.
Okay. All right. There you go. So plan on it, folks. There's where we're at. And with that,
Annual
Oh, that
conference, GSLAS conference is October 13th through 15th.
yep. Okay. As you can tell, this is an old slide because one concern was on there for last time. Oops. Sorry about that. And Greg just checked on board, so we'll take it from there. So I need a motion to adjourn. Do I hear one?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, so be it. Well, wait a minute. I can't just dictate like that. If you're opposed to this meeting being adjourned, please speak up. Going once, going twice, gone. All right, there we go, folks. We're adjourned.